This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Rohde, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Baglan.
By now, you have seen the movie American Sniper. It features an expert in marksmanship. On this week's show, we revisit a show that features not just a long-range marksman, but a man who helps train snipers. We originally had set out to talk about BB guns and pellet rifles, but his expertise goes far beyond that. Interesting conversation this week with Mr. Bill Balda on Kentucky Afield Radio.
When I'm 15, I'm going to be prom queen. When I'm 15, I'm going to have my own limo and private jet.
15 is a good year. Just ask Kentucky Fish and Wildlife. To honor our 15th anniversary of elk hunting, the new Pick 4 option doubles your chance to take home a trophy.
When I'm 15, I'm going elk hunting.
The Kentucky Elk Draw. Is 2015 your lucky number? Get your elk permit and dream big.
sw.ky.gov.
You know Kentucky parks, but what about Kentucky wildlife areas? Areas provided by hunting and fishing fees, not state taxes. There are more than 40 in all, but if you see just one, you see part of what makes Kentucky great. Wildlife and wild places. Another reason why the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife is your partner in the great outdoors. Explore more at fw.ky.gov.
This is Charlie Baglan, and you're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. There's a term we tend to use a lot, especially in basketball country. It's called good shot or nice shot. We use that term in pool, hunting, archery, hockey. We have invited a fella today who knows probably better than anyone what the term good shot really means. He is an expert, world-renowned expert marksman, Bill Balda. And Bill, on my way to work this morning, I was thinking back to that old TV show, Chuck Connors and the Rifleman. This must have been, I'm guessing, the 60s. And this cowboy is walking down a dirt street in some old west town, and he has this rifle, and he's shooting from the hip as he is walking. And he takes 5 or 6 shots, whatever the rifle holds, and the next thing you know, they show the target, and he has planted all these bullets right on target in a size no larger than a quarter.
That's not realistic.
You're a marksman. What is realistic? What does Hollywood do that, just doesn't happen?
That's a prime example right there that'll lead into the rifleman that is not even using the sights to figure out where his rifle is, his muzzle is pointed. He has no idea. The marksmanship that I've been trained to do is called precision marksmanship, and one shot gets the job done, and you don't need all those other shots.
He wasted 4 or 5 bullets there.
Yes.
He's just showing off.
Now, there is a way to shoot quickly and accurately, but that's not it. And I'm trained to do that too, but
if you're going to shoot from the hip, you better shoot a whole lot because you're going to miss a whole lot.
Well, I don't think you should shoot from the hip, period. I don't think it's safe. I don't think you have any idea where your rounds are going to go, even if they're going to hit what you're using for a safe backstop. I mean, there's no control whatsoever. That's why you see in pistol matches, the defensive pistol matches, they're shot in a pit where you have 3, even 4 sides, high ground berms that are taller than the shooters. And that's to contain all these bullets that go everywhere. Even when they hit the target, they're hitting metal targets. You have no control where they go after that. So
we sat down here today to talk about air rifles because we had a request, an email said, would love to know more about BB guns and air rifles and pellet guns and that sort of thing. And we've gotten off talking about marksmanship. And I would say for a reason, there's a difference between air rifles and BB guns versus hunting rifles. And there's a difference between marksmanship and what you see in cartoons where you get the trick shot cowboy trick shooters. We have military, I think we call them, snipers, that can take a long shot, the impossible shot from a football field away. Sharpshooters, they are very good. I keep going back to the Hollywood where you don't even have to look and you just pull, and while you're riding the horse, you can pull it from your hip and hit precision, and it doesn't work that way.
No. Even the military with their close quarters, they're still using the rifle in the shoulder. They're still using the sights. They may not use it the same way a precision shooter uses them, but they still know where their muzzle is pointed. And the only way you're going to do that with a rifle is to fire it from your shoulder. The idea that 100 yards is a long way, it is a long way for a handgun. It is a long way for a .30-30, for a lot of the very oldest rifle cartridges we have. But if you're using a bolt-action rifle to hunt with, or an AR-based type rifle with the cartridges that narrow down, that have a sharp shoulder that narrows down to a narrower neck that holds the bullet in the cartridge, these high-intensity rounds, 200 yards is literally, physically a chip shot if you shoot the shot correctly. There's 3 things you have to do to shoot a rifle, whether it's an air rifle at 10 meters or a Palmer rifle at 1,000 yards. It's the same. You need to have sight alignment, trigger control, and follow through. You need to align those sights, which if you're using a scope, that's very easily done. If you're using iron sights, you need to align that front sight and the rear sight with the target placed in front of the front sight correctly. Errors in sight alignment are far more important than errors in sight picture. If your sights are aligned and you break your shot on the right side of the target, you will hit the right side of your target. If your sights are not aligned, but that front sight is centered on the target, but not centered in the rear sight, you will more than likely have a complete miss, because errors in sight alignment introduce an angle, and the further away the target is from the muzzle with that error in angle, the further off the round will be.
Understand that.
Now your trigger control is basically pulling that trigger smooth and straight to the rear without disturbing your sight alignment. And your follow-through is watching that front sight, or the crosshairs in your scope, if you're using a scope, come back to the target. Your round needs time, not very much time, but more time than people think, to clear that muzzle.
Does it really?
Yes.
How much time is that?
We're talking, fractions of a second here. However, if you pull the trigger and you jerk it, and move the rifle,
you'll miss completely.
You'll miss it to some degree.
Sure.
And follow through is an extension of not moving the rifle until you have finished shooting the shot. The shot's not finished until the round clears the muzzle. When we sight in a rifle, we're not only sighting in, adjusting the sights to the point of impact for the bullet, we're also taking into account how we hold that rifle and where that muzzle is in the recoil pattern. The muzzle is moving as the bullet leaves. As the bullet leaves your barrel, or your shot string leaves your shotgun, or a round leaves a pistol barrel, that muzzle is in motion. And follow-through allows us to have a consistent motion and have that muzzle in the same place every time when that round leaves the muzzle. If that muzzle is in a different spot when the round leaves it from the shot before, you're never going to get your rifle sighted in, and you're not going to get a good hit.
And if you have that rifle sighted in, unless it is in a vise, it's something absolutely permanent where your shoulder has a little flex to it. Let's say you're taking a 500-foot shot. If 510 feet, do you need to re-sight your sights? Need to readjust? Is it going to be a little...
It depends on the size of your target. If I'm shooting at a deer, and my personal limit is probably 300 yards shooting at a deer with my rifle, the difference between 250 and 300, I don't need to worry about.
It's imperceptible.
No, it is perceptible. But the vital area of a deer is large enough,
gotcha.
And my round shoots flat enough that it will still hit in the vital area, given that I shoot a good shot in the middle of the vital area.
Bill will talk about your competitive life coming up after the break. The subject, believe it or not, is BB guns, air rifles, and pellet rifles, and we'll get to it, we promise. Bill Balda is the guest. My name is Charlie Bagman, and you're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. Back on Kentucky Afield Radio, this is Charlie Bagman. Bill Balda is my guest, and he is a distinguished rifleman, an honor bestowed by the Civilian Marksmanship Program. Mr. Balda is a part of an elite group who trains military snipers. Now, while the show is about air rifles and BB guns, we brought in the very best to chat about them. And, Bill, you compete with BB guns and air rifles, too. Give me a quick rundown of your competitive resume.
I've shot competitive rifle in several different events. Small bore, Olympic style 22. Air rifle, also an Olympic discipline. Most of my success has actually been in what we call high power rifle, where we shoot standing, sitting, and prone, and we shoot 200, 300, 600 yards with iron sights, and we shoot slow fire, a single load, 1 round a minute. We also shoot rapid fire, where we have 60 or 70 seconds to shoot 10 shots with a magazine change.
The objective, I trust, is to hit the bullseye, every single time, just as if it were archery.
Yep, we have a black bullseye in all these disciplines, and we have scoring rings on it. In high power, we have a 2-minute 10 ring. 2 minutes of angle, or MOA, you may have heard that term. What that means is a minute of angle is an inch at 100 yards. But it is an angle. So if you have sights that move a quarter minute per click, 1 click is worth a quarter minute of angle, that means at 100 yards it'll move the impact of the round a quarter inch. If you want to move it a whole inch, that's 4 clicks. So, by definition, an MOA is an inch at 100 yards, but it's also 2 inches at 200 yards. It's 3 inches at 300 yards, and so forth. Our 10 ring, when I say it's a 2-minute 10 ring, it's 6 inches across, all the way across at 200 yards. That's what we're trying to hit. At 600 yards, that 6 inches is the X ring used to break ties. So, even though the black is one size, the scoring ring we're trying to hit is a smaller one. What I have learned is that out to 200 yards, with the standard hunting high-power rifle cartridges, the wind will blow you around more than it will blow the bullet out to 200 yards.
That's what I was wondering, because you have the curvature of the earth to take into account.
Not at these distances.
Not at these distances.
Beyond probably, beyond 1,000. Out to 1,000, you don't need to worry about Coriolis effect. Or
how about wind? How about gravity? How about...
Gravity is part of your sighting in process, or having a zero for a given range. You need to change your elevation or increase how far over the target you hold. Gravity is very easily compensated for because it is constant. It never changes. Wind and light are the two big factors.
How does light play into it?
For scopes, you need enough light for the scope to operate. For iron sights, depending on what style you're using, there are a lot of optical effects. If you're out there using iron sights on your bolt action, that came with your bolt action rifle, where there's a front post and a V or a U, a notch in the rear, on a real bright sunny day, your target, which through your sights will appear black, it will look larger. As clouds come in and it gets darker and your amount of light goes down, the appearance will shrink the size of that target. This is an optical effect, but the result is if you have sighted in your rifle to hold at the bottom of the deer, what we would call a 6 o'clock hold, on a bright day that deer's going to look taller and your shots are going to go lower. And on a dark day, that deer will look smaller and your shots will go higher. And that's why I usually recommend that we use a center of mass hold, that you put that front sight in the middle of your target.
In your competitive rifle competitions, you brought home a few first-place trophies, have you not?
Well, a few. Not as many as people think, but yeah.
Well,
there are very good shooters in Kentucky.
Tell it, are these state, national, regional? Give us a smorgasbord of what you have on your belt.
Probably my largest accomplishments are making distinguished riflemen. That's an award that's issued by the Civilian Marksmanship Program to civilians. It's also a military marksmanship award. It started with Philip Sheridan from the Civil War when he was general of the Army. The Army had a problem with marksmanship throughout the Civil War, and the Union leaders recognized this after the war. The Army decided to introduce competition, and that's where the Army started learning that, or had a policy that competition is training. They started rifle and pistol marksmanship competitions to improve the level of our soldiers' marksmanship. But they very quickly found out that it was the same guys winning all the time. And after a while, folks, they weren't motivated anymore. So they created a system where the top 10% of finishers in special matches received points. When they got to a certain number of points, they were awarded Distinguished Riflemen. That's actually 30 points. So at that point, those who are Distinguished Riflemen have received their award. They can keep shooting, but they're not eligible for more points. They can be a match winner in what's called an excellence in competition match. In 1920, this started in the 1880s. And in 1923 or so, civilians were allowed to compete for this. And we have about 30,000 classified competitors in high-power rifle in the United States. And I became Distinguished Rifleman in 2003, and there's a number on the back of the medal. It's about, and my number is 1583. Since 1923, I was the 1,583rd person, civilian, to receive that award. Now, I just saw last week some people who have received the award, and they're up in the 2,180s now. So there's about 600 more people. The military side, I don't know what they're up to now. I think it is finally, I'm pretty sure it has finally surpassed the number of people who have won the Medal of Honor. In the 90s, more people had been issued the Medal of Honor than the Military Distinguished Rifleman Award.
We can look at, I don't know, CNN, maybe Cops and Robbers show on TV, and you will see someone pick off the burglar from a rooftop, and what that type of sniper, I would presume that would be called. Is that sort of the level you are, or a distinguished rifleman would be?
That's what we would call precision shooting. I am also among a much smaller group of people, of about 90 or 100 people, who were training squad-designated marksmen in the military. These SDMs used their M16s to engage targets between 300 and 600 yards. There's this gap. Military snipers start 600 or 800 yards away. That's short range for them. The regular infantrymen are expected to be able to engage targets out to 300 yards, meters. So there's this gap between 300 and 600, and we were training new marksmen who are part of an infantry squad, one guy out of 8 or 10 folks who is trained to fill that gap and take those kinds of shots.
That's incredible. It simply is. I knew when we sat down to these microphones that I was going to get sidetracked and wanting to talk about this, just because it's just fascinating. But we sat down to talk about air rifles of other things, not necessarily hunting rifles, not your .22, but air rifles. I grew up personally with a pellet rifle. It was a pump action, and we had a request to talk about this because BB guns in the hands of a 6-year-old may not be the safest thing. Dog may get one in his eye or shoot birds. And you understand the picture I'm trying to paint here. But I had a pellet rifle, and so I was thinking that if I had an air gun or I had a BB gun, they were made to shoot Coke cans off fence posts. But they have grown in popularity since I was a little boy. They look like something you would take to war with you.
Air rifles definitely, over the last 30 years, have gone through quite a technological change. And what I'm going to talk about here are pellet rifles. Your regular old Red Ryder BB gun, they still exist. They haven't changed. They still shoot a copper-plated BB that's going to bounce all over the place, hence the old saying, you shoot your eye out, kid.
Yeah.
Those actually you need to be very careful of because they have such a large ricochet possibility. And the power line daisies where you can pump and get more power, those still exist.
We will find out more when we come back in our second half hour with one of the nation's very best marksmen, Mr. Bill Balda. My name's Charlie Bagwin. Stay with us on Kentucky Afield Radio. Charlie Bagwin back on Kentucky Afield Radio. You can find old episodes of Kentucky Afield Radio or listen to this show again just by going to myhuntingandfishing.com. You can also find us at the Kentucky Afield channel at youtube.com or find us on iTunes. Just put Kentucky Afield Radio in the search box and voila, there we are. Time now for our fishing report.
In western Kentucky, it's still wintertime fishing, so you're going to pick and choose your days, but there's some excellent crappie fishing on the right day in the middle of winter. You're going to be fishing the ledges or the flats adjacent to the creek channels in your larger embankments like Blood River, Little River. But I've also heard on these sunshiny days it's a good time to just cast the banks. There's some fish moving up shallow, just kind of looking around when the sun's up and warming those rocky shorelines. Well, your bass fishermen, they're going to be out a little bit deeper on your ledges, your main lake points, your little points within your secondary channels, something like a jerkbait. This is a good time of the year for try those Alabama rigs while those bass are all kind of just suspended out there chasing after shad. Well, this is Paul Reister, and I hope you find a nice warm day to go fishing here in the middle of winter.
Hi, this is John Williams with the Fishery Report for Southeast Kentucky. It's been a very cold and snowy week, and very little fishing activity is taking place in the southeastern part of the state. Before this latest cold spell at Cedar Creek Lake, our crew clerk reported some nice bass being caught 15 to 20 feet deep on jigs and also jerk baits, crappie even a little bit deeper, 20 to 30 feet on minnows and jigs around structure there at Cedar Creek Lake. Also, a few trout being picked up on spinners, worms, jigs, and even minnows. Elsewhere in the district, it's pre-spawn time for walleye. They'll be moving up the major arms of Lake Cumberland, the Cumberland River below Cumberland Falls, and also the Big South Fork. Minnow and jig is the primary method to catch those. They should be staging below the major shoals in those rivers. As always, good luck, be safe, and stay warm.
This is Rob Roll in the Northwestern Fishery District. With the bitter temperatures we've had, most all of our waters are frozen. Rough River Lake, Nolan River Lake, even our large reservoirs are both pretty much locked up with ice. So as soon as the weather gets a little warmer and the lakes thaw out a bit, it'd be a good idea to walk the shoreline, especially at rough, but also no land, and see if you can pick up a few nice crappie like they've been doing. So with these single-digit temperatures, snow on the ground, it's a great time to sit in a warm house or garage, clean and oil your fishing reels, change the line on them, sort out the tackle box, clean it out a bit, restock some baits. Just a lot of good things you can do towards fishing on these cold winter days. If you are out, please remember, be safe anywhere around or on the water. These temperatures, hypothermia will set in very quickly.
Kentucky Afield Radio, and we are back with more on BB and pellet rifles. Talking with Bill Balda, the same Bill Balda who heads the Kentucky Hunter Education Program. After the break.
When I'm 15, I'm going to be prom queen. When I'm 15, I'm going to have my own limo and private jet.
15 is a good year. Just ask Kentucky Fish and Wildlife. To honor our 15th anniversary of elk hunting, the new Pick 4 option doubles your chance to take home a trophy.
When I'm 15, I'm going elk hunting.
The Kentucky Elk Draw. Is 2015 your lucky number? Get your elk permit and dream big.
sw.ky.gov.
You know Kentucky parks, but what about Kentucky wildlife areas? Areas provided by hunting and fishing fees, not state taxes. Explore more at fw.ky.gov.
My name is Charlie Baglin. You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio, and we're back with a man who trains military snipers. He is a distinguished rifleman. His name is Bill Balda. The topic today is air rifles and BB guns and pellet rifles, and Bill, like anything, they have evolved over the years.
Air rifles have evolved from my first air rifle that I competed with was actually a piston with a spring inside. And when you cocked it, it released the spring. When you pulled the trigger, it released this spring that had been cocked, and it shoved this piston forward through a chamber, and the air in that chamber went down the barrel and pushed a pellet out the barrel and downrange. In the late 80s, early 90s, they came out with very reliable pneumatic.
Pneumatic is a way of saying air. Is that like a pump
when
rifle?
You cocked it, you actually compressed air in a chamber.
Yeah.
And when you pulled the trigger, it released this compressed air. There was no piston behind it. And you release the compressed air, and that pushes the pellet down the barrel. And these are both still highly accurate rifles. I have one of each at home. And currently, air rifles, the most accurate and powerful air rifles, are what I would call compressed air, or CA, guns. Another term for them is PCP, which is pre-compressed cartridge, something like that. And you actually fill this tube with air from a scuba tank, or you pump it up and you insert that into the rifle, and each shot releases, there's a regulator in the rifle that releases a specific amount of air out of that tube into the chamber to run the pellet down the barrel.
Is CO2 still used?
CO2 is still used. CO2 predates the compressed air, but it's the same concept. It is a compressed gas in a cartridge. The difference being not only the difference between regular air and CO2 is a CO2 comes in a cartridge that's, it's about the length of, a little more maybe than the length of a pen or a pencil. CA uses a tube, a cartridge, that is refillable. CO2 is not, and it is about 1.5 inches in diameter, or 1.25 inches in diameter, and it's probably 20 inches long, and it holds a lot more. You get a lot more shots. Being refillable, you don't have to go out and buy new cartridges. CO2, you have to change cartridges fairly often, but with CA you can get a couple hundred shots out of one fill-up. The technology has changed, and what that has allowed some people, some companies to do is take that technology and put it into field target air rifles. There's a whole discipline out there where the match is held outside, and you have animal silhouettes at different ranges, and you put scopes on them. There's some really wild, futuristic-looking stocks with these. I mean, there's some cool-looking rifles. Some of them are kind of ugly, too.
I was shopping yesterday on the web for some of these, looking at what they cost. Anywhere from $50 for a BB gun to $300, $400, $500, $600. Some of these fancy models. I'm impressed. I may have spent, back in the day, $39 for my air rifle, and it was one you pumped up with air. Just kept cocking it, and it would just compress more and more.
You have to pay for that technology. And there are air rifles out there that are far more expensive than what you found yesterday.
BB guns. Let's define BB. People use BB as if they know what it means. What's that BB stand for?
Its original use was as a size of shot. Triple B, I believe, is bigger than BB's. T is bigger than triple B. F's bigger than... You'd have to get a chart to make sure, which order it really is in. But I do know F's bigger than T, and T's bigger than triple B, and triple B, I'm pretty sure, is bigger than BB's.
There are a variety of guns out there that, if it's right or wrong, sort of have this category of they are playthings. They are toys. BB guns.
No.
BB guns, for example, paintball guns, even squirt guns. But we know that they are not. Well, maybe the squirt gun is. But we know that they are not. But is this a good place for a beginner, if that beginner is 5 years old or 25, to start with? Who is the market for a BB or a pellet rifle?
Kids are still the market. I think it's incumbent upon parents to ensure that their kids understand safety and that these are not playthings. A pellet in the wrong spot can kill.
Yep.
A BB in the wrong spot can blind someone. None of these are made for shooting at people. And kids need to understand that. And I'm not one to tell people how to live their lives, but there is a responsibility that if someone has a BB gun or a rifle or anything that shoots a projectile, even a Genesis bow, there is a responsibility to know how to be safe and make wise, safe decisions while using these.
Okay, for Uncle Bill, who buys his nephew Joe for his birthday a pellet rifle, air gun, and thinks, oh, it's fine, it's just a BB gun, or it's just an air gun. Do you advocate still going through a gun safety course or class, or because you teach this as part of hunter education?
Yes, I think that's a good idea, and I myself would not purchase something like an air rifle. I wouldn't purchase an air rifle or an air pistol for a niece or nephew who had not been through some sort of safety training concerning firearms.
Or you could give that to them and say, now listen,
I can do that.
You can have this, but you have to, I've already signed you up, or here's where these courses are going to be held, and you're going to go through this and learn how to use it wisely. I would presume that would be the ethical thing to do.
Yes, that is certainly the ethical thing to do. And in my family, with my family's background, all of my siblings would, and my cousins would feel the same way.
Let's take a pellet rifle. I'm going to guess that is smaller than a .22 rifle.
That depends.
Circumference. What's the typical sizes of these pellet guns?
Pellet guns, which is typically when someone talks about an air rifle, they're talking about a pellet gun, come in 3 calibers. 177, which is the vast majority, 20, which is pretty rare, and 22.
So they're the same size around, same diameter.
That's a caliber. So a 22 air rifle pellet is it's the same diameter as a 22 long rifle bullet.
And as far as the velocity,
it's way less.
Is it a 10th? Is it a 20th?
Well, I have to take that back. My precision rifles are shooting about 650 feet per second. But you can buy air rifles that go up to 1,100, 1,200 feet per second with a 177.
With a 177.
Because they are lighter than the 22s. And velocity, there's only so much air you can push through. I think the most powerful air rifles I know of are side cocking, one cock, and they are piston driven. They are still spring inside a piston. Most of those are running between 900 and 1,200 feet per second. I think there might be a few CA guns that can do that. I myself have not run across them. There are air rifles in larger calibers. There are air rifles that go all the way up to a .450 caliber. There are large caliber air rifles in the .357 range, the .350 caliber range. These can be used in states where it is legal to do so. They can be used to hunt deer.
Really?
As far as I could tell, the companies that manufacture these types of air rifles do not recommend using them on any game heavier than 200 pounds.
At what distance? The normal distance with which you would shoot your .22 or .30-30 or the 30.
I think we're talking about 50 yards at the most. With these speeds and those size bullets, they will slow down very quickly and lose their effectiveness as their speed drops. The place that I see air rifles being used in hunting more than anywhere else is small game. And the higher velocity, as I said before, the higher velocity air rifles tend to be the 177s. The best quality pellets tend to be 177s. That's the standard. That's the industry standard. Even though it's the smallest, it's still the most versatile caliber. You're going to find more rifles in 177 caliber than you will 20 or 22. And I think there may be only one or two companies that even make 20 caliber.
Are they legal for use for hunting in Kentucky?
For small game, yes.
And so that would be squirrels?
Rabbits. Now, not a lot of people do this, and I probably know half of them. But it is legal to use, particularly the 177s are accurate enough, and you can buy them that are powerful enough to reliably kill squirrels with one shot.
I would assume, then, that conservation across the United States is funded a lot by the Sport Fish Restoration Act and Wallop-Bro, Pittman, Robertson. These are federal excise taxes that apply to archery equipment, shotguns, riflery, fishing lures.
I don't know if they're applied to air rifles.
I was curious if they might be. It may be worth a Google after the show, but seems like it would be an extra source of some revenue for conservation. But I don't know and if they're not, then maybe they are still considered toys. Unfortunately,
no, they're not considered toys. Just because the federal government hasn't taxed something doesn't mean it's not a toy, or doesn't mean it's a toy. So you need to be concerned about backstop, what's between you and your target, what's beyond your target, as much with an air rifle as you do with any other firearm that you hunt with or archery tackle.
Bill, the music is playing. Got to take a break. BB guns, air rifles, pellet guns. One more segment to go with our distinguished rifleman, Bill Balda. So stay with us here on Kentucky Afield Radio. Bagland back in our last few minutes on Kentucky Afield Radio. We're talking to Bill Balda, who is a high-power, long-range rifle precision marksman. The subject is air rifles and BB guns, and there are also air pistols as well. Do they pack the same punch?
No. Their accuracy drops off much more quickly. It's because of mostly the physical shorter barrel does not allow the velocities to get up high enough. The longer the barrel and the more air you're pushing through that barrel, the more speed your pellet will have when it clears. Once a pellet clears a barrel, and this is true for a rifle bullet too, once your projectile clears the muzzle, it can no longer increase in velocity. But in the barrel it can. Now there's a limit. Your barrel can be long enough that it reaches the point of maximum velocity and then doesn't go any faster while still in the barrel. Barrels that long tend to be that long for other reasons. Makes the rifle more balanced, or it makes the firearm easier to shoot well, or smoother when you're swinging in the case of shotguns. Waterfowl guns have longer barrels. You could use that weight in the barrel to keep your swing going after you pull the trigger. Air rifles, the barrels are shorter than people think. A lot of barrels are actually... I know the barrels on my rifles, on two of my Olympic-grade rifles, are only 16 inches long. And what you're really looking at is a shroud over the barrel that extends to which the sights are attached to that shroud. But field target barrels, they're as long as they look. They're that way to generate more velocity.
Let's talk a minute about competitions with these in Kentucky. I was paging through the internet, reading about air rifles, and see that the NCAA is big time in this. And you said that you compete in it. If somebody wanted to get started, of course, they could get it with their buddy and go shoot the Coke cans off the fence posts. But it gets more involved in that, more complicated, more technical. Where can you go? Are there gun clubs? Where do you start?
There are a lot of high schools that shoot in Kentucky, and almost all of them use air rifles of one sort or another. Most of the junior ROTC teams at high schools in Kentucky are air rifle teams, and they're shooting 3-position air rifle, which is a set of rules that is actually a group of organizations have come up with that. They're led by the CMP, the Civilian Marksmanship Program, whose mandate is marksmanship training. They are a quasi-government organization. They have a mandate and exist due to congressional action, but they have no budget from Congress, and they have found ways to fund themselves, to fund itself. But also part of this group that wrote the rules are American JCs, the Boy Scouts, the Marine Corps and Army junior ROTC programs, and there's actually 2 categories. There's a sporter air rifle, which uses much less expensive equipment, much less expensive rifles, and there's a precision category, which is full-on Olympic-style equipment. Our current NCAA air rifle champion is a UK shooter, Connor Davis, who got his start at Shelby County, shooting for Shelby County High School on a precision air rifle team.
Incredible. That's great.
I think people need to remember that air rifles are very much like firearms in that they are not toys, and you need to be aware of the same safety considerations that your firearms require. I think shooting well with an air rifle is the same as shooting well with any other rifle that's a firearm. You're still going to need to have sight alignment. You're still going to need trigger control. You still need to have that follow through and let the shot finish before you move, before you start to try and reload or take the rifle down. I think that pretty much covers it. Same safety considerations, and you still have to shoot them the same way.
Daisy, for the longest time, has been the brand to go to for a BB gun. Is Daisy like the leader? What are the top 3, 4, or 5 brands for air rifles? Somebody wants to get out there and look and say, yeah, I heard Balda talking about that. That'd be a good one to consider.
Daisy still makes a lot of good air rifles. I don't know if Daisy makes a CA, compressed air. Most of the best rifles are actually made in Germany and imported. There's a lot of reason for that. After World War II, firearms weren't big in Germany. They had occupation forces, so they pretty much migrated. Germany has shooting clubs that have been in existence longer than the United States, a lot longer than the United States, and they weren't going to give up that tradition just because they couldn't use firearms. So they transferred to air rifles and air pistols, and because of that, they have the industry. They have the industry standard for accuracy and power. Those companies like Walther and Fine Workbau. But again, those are expensive top-end air rifles. Crossman, I believe, makes some CA guns now. Their Challenger was a very reliable CO2 gun. Sheridan and Benjamin still make. They're still in business. They've been making air rifles since before I was born.
If somebody wanted to learn more about gun safety, hunter education course, does that cover it all?
Hunter education will cover, if what you want to use is take an air rifle out to shoot small game, hunter education course will cover everything you need to know. Air rifles are also an event in 4-H competition. 4-H shooting sports is very big in Kentucky. A lot of kids shooting 4-H.
Do you take that gun as seriously when you get home, to keep it in a safe, to unload it, to put the trigger lock on?
My firearms are kept unloaded and in a safe.
And just because there's no gunpowder in a pellet rifle, you still need to unload it and go through the steps to keep it safe.
Yeah, in fact, if you're not going to use it for a long time, you need to discharge the air from the reservoirs. It's hard on the seals. Your seals will deteriorate faster the longer they're holding high pressure air behind them.
Well, Bill, I have learned a lot. This has been interesting. I'm glad we had the request to do this show. If there's nothing else, we'll wrap it up here. I always ask my guests, do you text and drive?
No.
All right, Bill Balda, the man in charge of Kentucky's hunter education and expert rifleman. Thanks so much for being on Kentucky Afield.
You're welcome.
It's been a good show. Distinguished Rifleman Bill Balda from the Civilian Marksmanship Program. We are out of time. Join us in a week and we will go inside outdoors again, right here on Kentucky Afield Radio.